Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Allison Park Leadership Podcast, where we have culture creating conversations. I'm one of your hosts. My name is Dave.
My name is Jeff, and of course, we're on staff here at Allison Park Church. I'm the lead pastor. Dave's the Northside campus pastor, and we're bringing back one of our fave special guests. So actually, this is Josh. So we are all family as well as on staff together. So Dave, my oldest son, Josh is our third born. Josh is the assistant campus pastor. And so we're going to have a conversation that's going to involve. So I always say one of the things that creates the menu of why we talk about what we talk about is that normally it's something you're bothered about, Dave. So like you've heard something, it's stuck in your craw, you're wondering about something theologically, culturally, church-wide, whatever. And so, Josh, you got bothered about something, so we thought, this is good.
It's been a year for me, too. The last time I was on was April of last year.
Okay.
Which there was a different tagline at this time. So I've been fanboying off to the side, and now
Fanboying.
I get to enjoy. Well, yeah, I get to listen to all of them. I think
before we get into it, we still got to do some thank you. So you can finish your intro, but
that's the end of my intro.
Okay.
That's what
welcome, Josh.
Yeah, it's good to be
and
here.
welcome to our listeners. And we always have to say this at the beginning. We're so thankful if you are a faithful listener, or if you're brand new, welcome.
Yep.
Glad to have you as part of the conversations. Typically what we do at the beginning is we give gratitudes to anybody that was kind enough to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. We would love to do that for all Spotify users. You're a huge deal as well, but Spotify doesn't show us your name. No new reviews this week to shout out. However, I'll just ask, as we always do, it would make a huge, huge difference to us if you could just take a couple of minutes, click on that thing on the podcast app, leave 5 stars. We would love to shout you out, and it really helps us to kind of spread the word about who we are and what we're trying to do, which is help people navigate some difficult, tricky conversations and waters. And if you're a Christian leader, maybe have some culture setting kinds of conversations because stuff needs talked about.
And or like or subscribe on YouTube. I hear that one. My podcast I listen to, they always say that. So, all right. So Josh, you're disturbed about something. That's why we're bringing you on.
Josh is disturbed. That's the
always disturbed.
That's the
so
title
you
of this
came across
podcast.
something that made you not offended, but more just like curious and wondering what's the right approach here. So tell us.
I've been reading some different stuff, and specifically, I came across a post that somebody shared with me by pastor or theologian. I don't know exactly what his title would be, but Nathan Finochio, who I'd also heard a really great message from him on holiness, and that's how kind of some of me and some of the people I know got turned on to his content. But he shared something last week that really got me thinking about kind of a follow-up to last week's. So last week you guys were talking about, or I should say last time you recorded, the episode was about discipleship and how does this work in methodology. One of the things that has been bothering me is how this plays into online church. So I'll just set up with a little bit of context. We started, and we've had a couple conversations in this podcast about online church and how does it work. And this podcast started in COVID. Was it in the middle of it?
Yep.
So like in the heat of it, we're talking about like, what even is this? And we started online church because of necessity. And then we moved out of it and we were talking about like the good and bad. Should this be a substitute or supplemental? And I've been listening to other people who talk about that same idea. Is this a substitute? Can this be, is online church real church, or is this just a substitute? But I think like...
And supplemental meaning
like it's not a replacement for, and that's what I see most people saying now. This is not a replacement for in-person church, but it's there's a lot of good things that come about that, and we can talk more about that. But really, like, even less about that, because we've had conversations about the good and the bad of this tool, and does it replace or does it not, and all of those things. But the thing that I came across was specifically about Nathan Finochio saying why they choose not to engage online in a lot of ways, which got me thinking less about like, is this good and bad, and more about what is our responsibility to communicate to the people in our church about what it means to be a healthy and growing Christian in relation to things like engaging in online church. Because right now, the way that it works is like, I think a lot of people are like, yeah, we encourage people to be here in person. Maybe the way that we encourage that is in different ways. But I have been feeling heavy about man, I feel like we have a responsibility to communicate something. And I don't know that we're always clear. A lot of churches in America, because we're in a new phase. So what is it? What should it look like for us to communicate?
And so this is new territory for everybody, right? It's so most people had some kind of online broadcast that was just like putting your services on Facebook or something before the pandemic. Then the pandemic hit, and then we all had to make it our primary for a minute, where most churches weren't meeting in person, but meeting through the online avenues. And then you heard voices like Carey Nieuwhof, who has a great leadership podcast. He was constantly saying, online is the future, right? So not only is it a part of what we do, it's got to be a major part of what we do, because a lot of people are going to engage with everything we do online. And I always felt a little bit like a little bit of a pushback from that particular angle. Now you're saying Nathan Finochio is saying we're going to go exactly the opposite. We're going to make online unavailable because we want to send the message to people that it is not enough to be online. You got to be in person. There are actually some churches that for a while, I think, wasn't it Judah Smith's church that out on the West Coast decided to go all online, like we're staying online and we're not going to come back in person. I don't think that's where they are anymore. But there's been so many iterations about this, questions about, like, for a little while at Allison Park, we called it an online campus. And we made it like, this is a campus just like all of our other campuses for the people that feel too afraid to come back out of the pandemic, or maybe just this is their preference. And then we went away from online campus to this is our online broadcast, right? So some people will still choose to jump in on the online broadcast. And now what you're asking the question is it enough to make that a menu item, or do we need to distinguish and say, this is not the same? Like, it's something, but it's not the same as in-person attendance. And do we have a pastoral obligation to say to our people, this is not the same? Like,
yeah, that's a good way to set it up.
Yep.
I was thinking the whole time, like, I feel like it's two questions.
Yeah.
One question is, like, because this is not a biblical matter of right and wrong. It's a protocol or procedure. So we're asking, one, what is a healthy amount for online, or what's a healthy perspective for online to take in the life of any believer?
Yep.
And then what's our responsibility in terms of clearly, forcefully communicating what's the need? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But like,
so this brings up a cover. There's like an underlying conversation to this conversation that you and I, Dave, especially have had over and over and over throughout this podcast, which is, so how could I say this? What is the role of a pastor in bringing the heat on something?
Yeah.
And how do you bring the heat without shame? How do you bring the heat without guilt? But how do you bring the heat in such a way so that you're actually leading people? Because a part of what it is to be a shepherd is to make sure that the sheep end up in healthy places, which involves the rod and the staff. They comfort me, right? So the staff is used to yank sheep back into a place where they're healthy, in love, in tenderness, but yet with some degree of pastoral urgency and authority.
Yeah, right.
And so you oftentimes are coming at it from the younger generation, saying we should be a little bit more intense on this, which is, I think, one of the entertaining parts of this particular of our podcast, because many people find that funny that you're tougher than I am on some things. And so I actually have people who remind me, Dave, of how you've called me out on something, and they'll say, "Don't get wishy-washy on that now, Pastor Jeff."
Yeah, I mean, I think some of probably my my stronger takes are just probably less experience, and some of the stuff that you have is because you've been through a lot.
Well,
more,
maybe, but there's some times I've actually corrected myself on maybe things I haven't been tough enough about. So, Josh, you brought up the good question, which is, have we been clear enough? First, I guess, what is our conviction?
Yeah, have we defined it?
Yeah. And then secondly, are we being clear enough about that? And so
before you go, can I ask you to potentially say, what did Nathan Finochio had some great hot takes.
That's what I was about to.
Yeah.
Great.
Let me read some excerpts from
Thank
this.
you. I'd love to hear
because
it.
what I love
Nathan Finochio is not a pastor of a church.
Okay.
Is he?
I don't think I know he is part of one, but
He's
I don't.
part of one, like
I don't-
part of the teaching team or
I
something.
think he's part of the
something like
teaching
that.
team, and then he has his own university he runs. Correct?
Theos, right?
Yeah, TheosU.
TheosU. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's really insightful, funny, in a lot of ways.
He's sharp. He's a very brilliant guy.
And what I like about him is that he's an instigator. So he'll say things and he'll take and intentionally like find ways to get under people's skin so that they're bothered and they have to think about something.
So if Nathan, if anyone ever forwards this to you and you're listening to this, we would love to have you as a guest on this podcast.
That'd be so fun.
That would be a great future guest to have. But go ahead, help us, Josh, with this.
So I'll just share a couple of the things that he said.
This was an email, by the way, right, to subscriber list?
Yeah, so one of our pastors subscribes to like a basically blog that he has where he posts a bunch of stuff, and he showed me this, and so I took some screenshots of some of the different parts of this. But he's talking about why his church that he's a part of doesn't have a huge online presence. So he says, if your church streams and socials, great. But here's our underlying philosophy at the moment and some things we are reacting to because there are some problems with socials and streams. They are creating a kind of congregant and Christian that we really don't want to come to our church.
Ooh.
He said,
so
things Jeff Leake would never say.
Take your time.
I will.
Slow down with these because this is
it's
dropping
heavy.
Dropping truth bombs
intense.
here, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
It's good. I like it.
It is really good. So and I'll read this next part slow. He says, firstly, I think the biggest problem with the congregant is consumerism, which is part of what I've heard you guys
another
talk
one
about
of the themes. Yes,
sure.
themes, and even last week what you guys were talking about. Consumers think that Jesus, and he mentions his church's name, Holy Saints, but the church exists to serve them. They become gluttonous monsters who create a multiplicity of problems communally. And so I could share part of the next part of what he's saying, but I think that's probably a good place to pause for a second because consumerism and casual and cultural Christians, and even part of what we were talking about yesterday is individualism. Before we, introducing the idea of this podcast when we were discussing yesterday, individualism of people who take from the buffet of what they want from Christianity and how they want to engage and what's best for them. Mm-hmm. That's why talking about online church, is it good or bad? It's like, well, part of it has to be done through our context of where the America is at, and consumerism is such a big, prevalent part of.
So can I ask you a question, Josh?
Yeah.
From what you were saying, in summary, I'm just trying to make sure I understand. You're saying Nathan's proposition is that he thinks online church, when it is the focus, creates those kinds of people with those kinds of issues. Like it turns people into gluttonous, whatever he said. Or is he saying that it attracts those people?
Well, he was clarifying that he's saying, I don't think these things are bad, but I think they need to be handled extremely responsibly, because I think already a problem with the average American congregant is consumer mindset of what's in this for me, or the individualism. Mm-hmm. So he's saying we have chose to significantly limit how we engage with this because we want to make sure that everybody who's coming here fully understands where we draw the lines and the boundaries of what it means to be.
So this caters,
healthy.
It caters to that mindset is what he's saying. He's saying we think online church, if it's not very carefully done, caters to the mindset of consumerism. Is the basic,
and especially American consumerism, which is we meet you where you're at, and you can engage with whatever level you want and whatever's good for you. That's his instigation. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
okay. Moment.
It's a good instigator.
All right, so let's do history now. Let's do a little bit of history, because I think there is a little bit of a difference between the medium and the message. Okay? So back in the 1920s, there was one of the most intriguing evangelist at the time was a lady by the name of Amy Semple McPherson. Mm-hmm. And she was huge in so many ways. She led many enormous healing revivals, traveled all over the country, planted a church called Angelus Temple, and it still exists today in Los Angeles, grew the church to over 20,000 people. She was one of the very first people to get on radio, because radio was brand new. It was a brand new medium. And there was a lot of people that felt that radio cheapened the message. Okay. Then came the era when television was invented. And there were early pioneers of Christian television, and Christian television that was being broadcast on Sunday morning. And so the question became, does Christian television undermine church attendance and church participation? And you could see some of the perversions that happen through Christian television, where you have people raising money in unhealthy ways, or
the stereotype of the televangelist.
The televangelist, which caused a massive damage to the reputation of Christianity. And so now here we are with another medium. Like, I guess there's one coming, which is AI, right? I by the way, I just happened to see, this is a little detour, I happened to see our good friend Johannes Amater on social media yesterday using AI to take one of his messages delivered in English and to translate it into Swahili. So you could watch him, and it actually moved his lips just like Swahili. So now he's translating himself into another language, which you would say AI is a medium that has potential dangers to it as well as potential benefits. So we would have to say the ability for a local church like ours or smaller churches to be able to broadcast to an audience online and reach people, that's actually a medium that created a very positive opportunity that wasn't there 10 years ago, right? And so that has to be something that's the medium itself, online ministry, is not necessarily bad, just like radio wasn't, just like television wasn't. But with each one of those inventions, there came potential downsides, right? So we're talking about the downside of it, and some of it is how we frame the proper use.
Well, you know what else is a really interesting analogy, and I don't have enough history to tell you the timeline, but I honestly hate this, but you ever do this? You read something, you have no idea where you read it. But in the last few years, I was reading about the how the production of food changed America, like in the last century, and it was like in the early 1900s, everybody only had home cooked meals, and it was limited what you could have. Like everybody had, like there was a very limited variety. Restaurants were limited because you didn't have access to stuff. You'd get in New York. It was a common Christmas present to have oranges because they were so rare there. It would be imported from Florida. They're expensive. But then, like, as mass food became produced differently, the production lines and all this different stuff, and you can buy anything on any shelf, the variety increased. But what also probably increased was the kind of awful food that you could live on a diet of. Because
other
it's
than
cheap.
The organic, fresh,
home cooked
local,
pot roast, you have to eat
with all the vitamins and nutrients. Now you're ending up with something that's processed and packaged.
TV
and stored.
dinners that has carcinogens,
which is bad for your body. Which is, I guess, a good comparison,
right? Where
you have the convenience of online, but is it processed food? You know what I mean?
Well, here's where I would love to jump in, because I feel like in some of the circles of people I talk to on staff, I have sort of become known as like the anti to this, because
you're like the anti-food guy.
But I don't
only
even
organic.
It's like Whole Foods, Josh.
we will joke around a lot, some of the people here, because I have recognized in my own life problems where I was complacent with just the junk food. And it was so significant for me that sometimes I can have intense takes that are probably too far. But I'll just say, before I share, because eventually where we're going to go again is our responsibility. I am so grateful for it. It's obviously like, it's not all just junk food that's terrible for you, because there's been messages that I've watched online that have brought me to tears and a deeper place of surrender. And I have met with other pastor friends over Zoom that they're across the world. And it's been really great conversations. And I love what our team does here. They pour their blood, sweat, and tears into what we do here.
Online church really, really well.
Yes.
For our punching weight
and our team
the size of our church.
Prays over it, and they believe in it.
Huge shout out to Brendan and Michael Lomquist and Jacob Miller and all the people.
And all of our
MC
hosts and the money that people have invested at Allison Park so that we could buy the equipment necessary to do this well.
So it's not just as simple as saying like online is junk food or digital is junk food.
We're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Right. Yeah. But it definitely is like, we're looking at your spiritual diet here is a big part of the question of as shepherds and looking at a church with the people that are coming, what's our responsibility to be like, hey, this diet of or just sort of drawing the line for people of like, what does it mean to be really a part of the church? Like, can you be a part of Allison Park if you come once every 2 months?
Sure.
What's the answer?
Forget
to that
about
question?
Allison Park.
Or any church. Sure.
I think in general, it's a really good question. Like, what does it actually mean to be a part of a healthy church community? Because, okay, one thing we do this soapbox sometimes, but, you know, I do think we tend as Americans to think about everything through the lens of individualism. So from my perspective, who am I? What's my personality? What's my passion? And we tend to think less from a group identity perspective of me as a part of a body or a family. But the church family is how we're constantly described. It's not an individual. There's a degree of that, but it's more often talked about from a whole body. So what does it actually mean to be engaged in a church family? Yeah. Why don't we, since Josh is the Whole Foods guy, do we want to have him start with this?
Let me mention a couple things, though, before we kick it back to Josh. So, if you live in a place in the world where you get no food, let's use your food example. Processed food's better than no food at all.
Absolutely.
Okay, so if you're in a place where you don't have access to a healthy local church and all you can actually get is something online, it's better to eat junky food than starve.
And God can bless that.
And God can bless that.
Absolutely.
Right. So it's not the fact that online is always junk food, but we're saying maybe it has a less nutritional value because of the lack of two things: the lack of being able to be in the room where you can be in the place where the tangible presence of God is more manifest because people are there together in agreement.
Yes.
And then two, you miss the body life. You can't really do body life without face-to-face moments of relationship. So you need to be seen and known, and you need to be connected socially. So that's why it's missing those two components, which makes the diet a little less than what it would be in person. By the way, I'll just say, I've been in rooms with pastors of large churches, and all the response, like, online will come up and they'll say, let's just face it, during the pandemic, I'd be watching my own church service and I wasn't all that engaged. and then, or they would say, yeah, I would just skip the worship. I would get to the message.
Skip to worship or skip the worship?
Skip the worship.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, because there was so much going on and everyone was talking and, we tried to sit our family down and, sit in front of this TV. But there was always something. Someone was fighting with each other, or so now some people are able to zone in. It's just them and in the service. They turn out all distractions. But I think another factor is because of interruptions and the ease of distraction. I think a lot of times people are maybe half there. I guess the balance of that is some people can be in the room and half there. Right?
That's true. That's definitely true.
But either way, I mean, that's another one of these things. So go ahead, Josh.
So the reason that I feel so particularly burdened by this at the moment is that I've been reading and studying a lot over the past couple of years about just a lot of different books and podcasts and different stuff like that, messages about spiritual formation, and just have experienced a couple key moments in, I would say, past 3 years of death to self and self-sacrifice, of God convicting me, and the life and the freedom and the joy that comes from when you recognize the value of these things and you put them at the front of your life. So I feel a heavy burden when talking about this, and I'll share, I guess maybe some of my opinions in a second, not from people need to be here. I heard just a quick money trail. I heard a different podcast, great podcast, but they were talking about some people beat down on online because they're insecure that they're going to lose followers to Stephen Furtick, or not as many people will come online, and they're insecure about what that does to the church. And I'm like, that's actually not what I'm focusing on. I feel a burden for the people of Allison Park, because I know that, again, the animal that we're up against, consumerism, casual Christianity, individualism, the antidote for that is understanding death to self and self-sacrifice. So I do think there's some responsibility to communicate to people, you have to be here. And I don't want to put a number of it has to be this many times, but I feel like burden to figure that out of what does that mean, and to draw a clear line for people, and to not be money. Because I feel like where we're at now is come whenever you want, engage however you want. God loves you. Obviously, that's maybe an extreme version of it, but go ahead.
So let me ask. Can I ask a question before we move on from what Josh just said? Josh, when you say you're burdened that we fight the monster of like worshiping yourself, like, you know, however you want it, have it your way, whatever, take whatever, like, and so you're concerned about online. How does being in person, in your opinion, combat that monster? Does that make sense?
Yes. Well, I think there's a lot of different ways, but I think, like, to sum it up, I think if you're going to be a real follower of Jesus, it comes from the understanding that you owe Jesus the best of what you have. And this is what we've talked about in the past of, like, this is why like tithing is a thing. But I think, like, tithing kind of with everything that you have, it's not just money. Yes, it's money, communicating about that, but it's understanding that God deserves the best of what you have. That's like a starting reason of it. But it's also, what was the question one more time, just so I can make sure I'm answering it well?
I was saying,
how does it involve you dying to yourself? And
by being in person, why couldn't you die to yourself online?
Because
No,
I
I'm
think
serious.
it sounds funny to say.
Yeah. But
well, in some ways you can, because you can, let's say you're not giving at all and you're really protective of your money, and you hear a message where, you know, somebody says, you know, you give God your best and then you start tithing. Okay, that's death to self.
Sure.
But what I'm talking about is also just recognizing that I think a lot of Americans view church as content driven. And so they tend to, because of social media and because of online church, think about, what do I get out of this message? And there is a huge benefit of what you get out of messages. Absolutely. But really, church is so much about showing up for people, even when you have nothing, showing up to serve God.
So it's Christ-centered, not content-driven, and it's community-based, right? So it's designed to be relational. Like church in and of itself is a people. It's not an event, it's not a building, it's not a happening. It's a people.
right, it's a family.
So if you belong to a people and you belong to a family, but you never show up to family gatherings, then you kind of wonder, do you really want to be in this family? Because it's one thing to be online and watch the family gathering. Now, if you have a job that prevents you from being there, if you're always working on the weekends, this is your only way to engage. If you live in another part of the world,
Or if you're sick, or I know people who have kids that are going through things.
Okay. So say I couldn't be at the family gathering, but I wanted to. I'm so loyal to it that I wanted to make sure that I was aware of what happened in all the aspects of the service, not just the sermon, so that I can continue to lean in consistently because I value my church family so much. That would be, in my mind, a really healthy use of an online experience, right?
Agreed.
But if it's a substitute, like I'm not going to do community because I'm really not interested in it, but I do want to get the content because I think the content would benefit my life. Yeah. That's consumerism. Is that
right? Yeah. Well, let me add a couple of thoughts that come to mind as we're talking about this. So you talked about manifest presence of God, because He does manifest differently in locations where you're all together. I mean, literally, that's scripture. Two or more are gathered. Talked about body life in the community. A couple of things that I think help fight against self-worship that you were talking about that come up to me. So one is, I think you were getting at this, Josh, but when we show up in community in person, we're choosing not just what's most convenient for me or my schedule, or what do I feel like doing today, but it's who might need me there. Because when we attend with purpose, like I am a part of this family, a part of this body, and we go with open eyes. Sometimes, like I think we tend to have a viewpoint that pastors are the ones that do ministry, and attenders are the one that receive ministry. But all church members are there to do ministry, and so if you
can't really work in the nursery online. You know what I mean?
Right.
We do broadcast some children's program, but you can't really get in the life of an 8-year-old and tell them how much you love and believe in them.
Right.
From an online perspective, at least not to where it's felt to that degree.
And even like the difference of I'm in the lobby and I notice someone who looks down and God says, go talk to them. That it can happen online. It happens far more when you're in somebody's presence.
And a mature way of approaching your weekend experience is to come not so much to get, but to give.
Exactly.
When you show up to church saying, I'm going to give worship to God with all my heart. I'm going to give my gifts and talents in some area of service. I'm going to give myself, being that I'm going to be present in the moment to listen to someone who's going through something and to minister to someone in need. I'm going to be present by bringing in my family with me because I want them to see the priority of what it is to be, putting God first in your life.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to listen to a message and experience worship, which is good content. But I think the what you put in actually makes you grow more than what you take out anyway.
Agreed.
And if you're not putting anything in, you're not really going to grow. I mean, you're going to get good information and inspiration, but you're not going to have that growth component.
And I think there's, sorry.
Go for it.
Would you mind if I add one more? I think there's one more thing that I was thinking about with community when it comes to dying to self and stuff. There is so when you're online, you can be as vulnerable as you choose to, but your anonymity is 100% in your control.
Right.
I can be 100% anonymous. Nobody would know if I'm a real person or if I'm a bot, theoretically,
I make a confession. Sometimes I've had a message on and a soccer game on another screen.
Sure. Yeah. Right.
Like nobody knows. I mean, what are you going to do?
Nobody would know. So you can be 100% anonymous, or you can be, more engaged, and then you could theoretically be vulnerable. But the less that you're in person with other believers, the less vulnerable you are. That goes beyond your choice, because if you're around people enough, there's a degree
they
where
can see you.
They
see your countenance.
I wish they didn't have to see that.
Your
but
attitude.
Yeah. You can't hide if you're there. You can try, but there's something that comes off of you to where people can see. I think anonymity is a really dangerous thing. It leads to isolation. It leads to stagnancy. That's why we're meant for community.
Okay, let me bring in a totally different article now.
Great.
Okay, this broadens beyond Christianity. There's an article that was written April 3rd, 2024. Derek Thompson, a staff writer for The Atlantic. He basically writes and says, I'm an agnostic, not a Christian, and I have been celebrating the decline of organized religion in our country for a long time. Okay, that's how he starts it. And then he goes on to say, but what I've come to understand is that, so here's what he says. Suddenly in the 1990s, the ranks of non-believers surged. An estimated 40 million people, 1 in 8 Americans, stopped going to church in the past 25 years, making it the largest concentrated change in church attendance in American history, according to the religion writer Jake Meter. In 2021, membership in houses of worship fell below a majority for the first time on record. Now, what he goes on to then say is that isolation, especially amongst young people, has become epidemic. And while people are no longer involved in community organizations or the church, there is this problem that's happening that is not a good thing at all. He says, for example, young people who are fleeing religion faster than older Americans have also seen the largest decline in socialization. Boys and girls ages 15 to 19 have reduced their hangout by more than 3 hours a week, according to the American Time Use Survey. There is no statistical record of any period in U.S. history where young people were less likely to attend religious services, and no period where young people have spent more time on their own. So he's saying maybe the fact, as an agnostic who doesn't like Christianity, maybe the fact that people aren't going to church anymore has been bad for our culture because so many people are isolated and disconnected. And that doesn't even factor in the change that happened with the pandemic in 2020, where a lot of people who are self-identifying Christians are not going to church either, which means the problem of isolation has gone through the roof.
Yeah.
And we aren't socializing enough. Our families are not socialized enough. There is something about being engaged with a community organization, especially a church family, that's healthy for everybody.
There is.
And you can't do that part only online.
I agree. Yeah. I also think there's something about the prioritization of being in church over other family activities or work activities. I understand that that's not always possible.
Yeah.
But our whole society has moved towards like clubs, programs, sports, achievements, work, whatever, that is like, well, this will supersede church. Church can happen whenever. This is important. But I would question that. I think the day and age that we're in, I think everybody should be able to take a look and say, what is it worth missing church for.
Mm-hmm.
Because just because something competes doesn't mean that church should always lose. I'm not saying this from like a let's build our own church. I'm just saying this from a pure your own personal discipleship. You know?
Well, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. What does that mean? Does that mean it's first? I mean, and okay, well, seek the kingdom first. That doesn't necessarily mean seek a church service first. But these are good questions to be asking ourselves. And now let me just say, okay, so one of the things we mentioned yesterday was how maybe we need to start, because we're in no way looking to go the Nathan Finochio road and eliminate the online presence at Allison Park.
Yeah, right.
Okay, we believe it has other purposes that have got great value. But when we acknowledge the online audience, because I do that every week, how should we do that?
So now we're opening it up. Best practices.
Yeah.
As
So
far
now,
as what do we
now
do?
let's talk about bring the heat part of the conversation.
Well, and it's doing that online, but it also is doing that for people who come in person
right.
sometimes.
So to say, hey, we're really glad you're here, meaning, because this is a value. Is that what you're saying, Josh?
Yeah, I'm saying to make it clear to people, yes, who are joining online, how we view it and how it works, but also to people who are, because my concern when we're addressing this is for people that come once a month. And I've talked to people like this, and you know, the conversation goes something like, oh, I haven't seen you in a while. Yeah, no, I come usually like probably 3 weeks online. I love watching online. It's just easier with my life. And then I come once a month in person.
Okay.
And it's not like I can't come. It's just like, it's just more convenient.
So you're going to pull out, what's the Nathan Finochio line? We don't want those kinds of congregants. What does he call them
gluttonous
again?
monster. Duplicitous or whatever.
The kind of congregant that we don't really want to come to our church.
Yeah,
It's so intense.
Read
that's
that-
what he
read
says.
that line again.
They're creating the kind of congregant and Christian that we don't really want to come to our church. Consumers think that Jesus and the church exists to serve them. They become gluttonous monsters who create a multiplicity of problems communally.
Oh my goodness.
But it really is this, like, I think, is it Hebrews 5 where it talks about like maturing?
Yeah.
Like if people just stay there and we let them stay there as pastors, thinking this is okay. Now, if
So we would agree that statement is an instigating statement.
Yes, absolutely.
And it doesn't represent
I mean,
the way
he's
we would
not-
talk about it.
He's not wrong. The thing is, he's intense, and
yeah.
it's I
gluttonous
would
monster is wild. Like,
yeah. It is okay. What I love about Nathan Finochio's approach is there is a hunger, especially amongst. So I hear this all the time now. Gen Z wants it straight. They want it raw. I think my generation does too.
Okay.
But I think especially going younger, that kind of statement is helpful because it's a dividing line. It can be triggering, like you gluttonous monster creating a multiplicity of problems for the community. But I mean, it can grow into that. He's not.
Okay.
He's just intense.
Yeah. All right. So we want to, well, I guess we're searching for, and this is not just with this issue, but for issues in general, how to bring the appropriate amount of pastoral protective heat
Yeah.
without calling people monsters.
right.
Can I
well,
propose a
especially
starting point?
just really quick.
Yeah,
I think
go ahead,
another thing that
'Cause
makes
I'm not
this-
sure that that's drawing a line. I think the monsters part is a little triggering,
Well,
and
it's-
it's probably not necessary to
It's
the
funny, though.
conversation.
I'm
But it gets
entertained
you,
by
here's
it.
what I love it. It gets you thinking. It
does.
upsets the internal balance. So you
But
go,
that's
I
what
need
made
to
me
think
ask: is
about
he
this.
the pastor of a church? Because it's you can be a commentator or an activist or a prophetic person who feels like they need to speak the truth and be instigating things. But when you actually have to lead a family, lead a church, you think different because there's a certain tenderness. Like that person you just described, Josh, that shows up and says, haven't seen you in a while. And they say, well, I attend 3 weeks online. I come one time in person. There's a certain pastoral tenderness to that conversation.
Yeah, my desire is definitely not to say you're a gluttonous monster. What are you doing? Yeah.
So, but we don't want to just for tenderness skip over truth.
Sure.
So speaking the truth in love, what is our messaging? How would you talk about this? What should we say?
Well, here's
when
the
we-
last part of this that makes this complicated is
Great.
that we are constantly making room for new people to come to the church. We want new people to come in. We don't want to water down what we do, but we also don't
And
want
we don't want them to jump over 10 hurdles to get here.
Yes, we don't
We
want
want
it to
them
be
to
this,
feel like, look, come just like you are, who you are, with wherever you are at this particular moment in your spiritual journey.
Yes.
And we want you to know when you show up here, we love you, we're for you, we are not going to shame you, we're on your team, we want you to succeed. But somewhere in the journey where they say, I want you to be my pastor, something else has to happen.
Yes. So let me read you one of the last parts of his article. That's just another intense statement. He says, when people come here, nobody is getting greeted with welcome home signs. You don't even know what we believe yet. So he's poking fun at the churches who have this welcome home. It's such good natured, and he's instigating them. But he says, nobody's getting greeted with welcome home signs. You don't even know what we believe yet. You aren't welcome home if you're a self-worshiping pagan. This won't be home if you don't repent. So it's like, it's so intense. But okay, here's the point, is that we have so many new people coming into the church, and we don't want to beat them over the head in the first week and call them gluttonous monsters. But we do have a responsibility at some point to draw a line where we say, you are part of the body of Christ, and here's what that means. Or to say, you are not part of the body, and that's okay. You can still attend. But like, if you want to be part of the body of Christ, here's what that means.
Sure.
I don't know the answer to this.
Okay. So we can talk it through. I think what I was going to say is, you're talking about, what do we say? Yeah. Probably before
because some of this is about language. Like obviously Nathan is saying welcome home may be tonally correct, but is probably not theologically correct.
It's not.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, but what I'm saying is, before we talk about what we say or even the tone, we probably need to have a general idea of what we believe.
Okay.
Because.
So what do we believe?
So let's just process, and with the grace, the umbrella of grace, to be wrong. No, it's okay.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Believe specifically about what?
What do we believe about a healthy diet of online as a supplement, not a substitute for church, but what do we believe about a healthy diet of online as best practice?
I think that's it. I think
so. What does it mean to be a supplement, and when does it become a substitute?
Okay, it is an okay substitute in the rare occasion that it is impossible to be in person.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's supplement. It's like I'm going to eat healthy foods for the most part, and I also have other stuff too.
So what's the most part? Let's say online is TV dinner. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Prepackaged pizza with a little broccoli thing on the side. See, this is what I'm talking about.
All right, so let me interpret. Let's say I'm not the pastor of the church, and I have a job that takes me out of town several times a month. I have a family with small kids. There are some times that I would feel like I would like to engage online. I'm traveling, and I could search to find a church in the community that I'm in, but I'd rather engage with my own home church. So I'm going to sit in my hotel room, and I'm going to fully engage in that worship experience because it allows me to stay in the flow of what's happening at my local church. I think that's a good, healthy thing. My 3-year-old's sick, and I have to be at home. I think that's a very healthy place. We're on vacation together, and we're going to go to church. We're going to say, you know what, let's take some time on Sunday morning and have a worship time together. Maybe it's inferior to what we would be if we were in person, but it gets us centered, and we have a conversation about it later in the day. Yeah. I think that's all great. If I moved into a new town, I probably would watch every church I was thinking about attending online 3 or 4 times.
Which is one of the great parts of online.
Before I would decide where I wanted to go in person to check it out. I think all of those are healthy things. I roll over on bed on Sunday morning and I'm like, I don't feel like getting up today. I'm just going to watch it online. I don't think that's a healthy decision. I think that's an unhealthy decision. Can you get away with it once in a while? Sure, probably can. But if that's a consistent, I don't feel like going today. That is probably the equivalent to, like I'm training right now for a half marathon, and today's a 9-mile run because we have 1 month to go before it. I really don't want to run 9 miles today. Like I really don't. If I chose to skip it, I wouldn't be ready for what's ahead. So indulging yourself, being soft on your flesh, is just not a good thing. Sorry about that. So I would say, you have to almost look inside to your motives in a way. Why am I online today?
If it's inability, then that's probably supplemental. If it's out of convenience and you don't want to reschedule things, then it's probably
I'm lack of a
probably
priority.
substitute.
Yeah.
Now, what I would just quickly
And
also say, in case somebody's unaware, at least at Allison Park Church, if you're like, well, sometimes I have stuff in the morning. Well, come at night. I have a 6 p.m. service.
Or there's one on Saturday night.
Or there's Saturday.
Yeah.
Come on Saturday to Hampton, or
Yeah.
come on Sunday night at 6 p.m. to Northside. There's enough options to where I think most people, if you choose to make it a priority to be there, you can be there.
Yeah.
It might take you a little bit farther of a drive.
So back to my exercising right now, since this is weighing on me.
Okay.
The only way we made it, Mel and I, is that several months ago we sat down and we put, because to get ready for half marathon, you have to run distances, 5-6 miles. Okay, that's time. Drive to the place you're going to run. You run. So we had a conversation. I said, if we hadn't put that on our calendar and prioritized that as this is the time we're going to run, we would have never found the time. I think weekend church is one of those big rocks. You put it in first and you say, this is a block of time. We are going to do this every week. And if it doesn't work here, we're going to move it over here to an evening space because we're going to be there. This is a priority to us.
Yep.
This isn't just a habit we have if it works out. It's a priority to it. And that helps you get in spiritual condition
Yep.
to be what you're supposed to be for God.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that comes from my desire to help people understand primarily I exist to serve God and to serve his people.
Yeah.
And everything else surrounds that. So it's not about church attendance to be
As
in
a
good
duty.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
about church attendance as a worldview and a perspective on my existence.
As an act of worship.
Exactly. So the person that I would want to challenge in a very pastoral way would be some of the conversations I've had, which I understand. The idea of it was a really long week. I was exhausted. I went through some, maybe not like crazy personal tragedies, but it was hard. It was really frustrating. I feel overwhelmed. I feel burnt out. I'm like, be in church. Like that's what you need is, and you may not leave and feel like that was so good for me, but it's like all of the best things in life. Marriage is a great example. We don't get married because of what we get out of it. Marriage is a covenant.
Well, we shouldn't. Yeah.
But some people do, and then it ends up not working out in the long run. We get married and we show up every day, whether we feel like it or not, because it's a covenant of self-sacrifice and death to self, of saying, you are more important to me than I am to myself, even when I'm not feeling up to it. Viewing the church in that kind of way is, so how do we, we still haven't figured out how we communicate it.
Right. No, but we have to start with like where we believe. I think I'll summarize what we just said in a second. Can I close a loophole? Because I'm seeing a gray area that somebody's like, that doesn't count for me. Here's how it is. Well, I don't go to church, but I have a life group. I'm like, that is not a substitute. I think so. Let me just say,
it should be a both.
It should be a both.
Yeah.
Having a great community that is a small thing that you're part of, to have life on life connection and iron sharpens iron with believers is great. But I don't think that's a good loophole to be like, well, as long as I watch online and have a life group, I'm fine. I think there's a healthy thing to orient our lives and our schedules around a community gathering of worship like we do on Sundays or on Saturday nights, to be together, and a life group is a supplement. Life group needs to be part of it as well, but I think we need both.
Yeah.
And
I would actually argue that life group isn't even, I think both are critical. I think both are really important to not just be worshiping with other people, but to be studying and encouraging. And I guess that could happen on a weekend.
I'm
for
just
sure.
saying we shouldn't. That's not a loophole to get to.
Yes, I agree with
Well,
you. Yeah.
and there is a certain accountability with the weekly rhythm.
Yeah.
Right? So anything you don't have accountability with, you will tend to be a little slack on. Right? So I just, I'm turning 60. I had some health blood tests and stuff like that. And I discovered I have I'm pre-diabetic, which means I start watching what I eat a little bit more. So I was offered by the doctor to get a health coach. So I have a call every couple of weeks with a lady who's my health coach, and she's helping me learn how to read food labels and count calories. And every time I have a checkup with her, it provides a level of accountability for me of how am I doing with my diet.
Right.
Okay. When I have exercised and had a trainer, the trainer has challenged me. They've kept me accountable. So if I don't show up for my workout, they say, hey, where are you? And if I say, well, I had a really hard week, there's little sympathy that comes from the trainer. Listen, I when we were running this half marathon on the last time, the trainer was on me. I remember one time in particular, we were doing a 5-mile run, and he was riding his bike next to me. And there's like in the North Park Lake where I run, there's like a little shortcut where you can avoid a big hill.
Oh yeah,
And-
I love that shortcut.
It's a great shortcut.
I had hit the shortcut moment. He's riding next to me, and I got ready to turn. He goes, "Oh, no." And I said, "What?" He goes, "You're not taking the shortcut. There's a hill for you to climb." And I was
That
like,
hill is
"I am not
awful.
climbing that hill." He goes,
Yeah.
"Yes, you are. I'm here to challenge you." So there's a certain level of pastoral authority and accountability that we should carry. And if we are here just serving customers
Yeah,
who attend our church,
yeah.
then the customer role is, how can we serve you? What can we do for you? How can we make this experience better for you? Which is all really good from a customer service point of view to pastor that way. But at
It's
some
actually
point,
not really good to pastor that
but
way.
what I mean is, well, there's a balance. At some point, you have to be the trainer or the accountability partner.
Well, you're primarily that. If we're equippers,
Yeah,
for people to do the works of service,
we have to say, hey, take the hill. Like
we're way
come
more
on.
coaches than we are customer service agents. But I actually think that's a huge mistake that creates the gluttonous monsters
is the customer service approach.
enabling through churches. It's pastors that are acting like, hey, we're Disney. How can we make this better for you? Excellence.
Yeah.
You
The
come in and you're
painful-
attracted to our excellence and you have a great experience. Yeah, but are you growing? Because that's
Yeah.
our main thing.
Because if all we're doing is customer service, we don't train champions.
Exactly.
What happens is you train consumers, right, instead of champions. But if you have a trainer pastor, then that trainer pastor is, come on,
Yeah.
let's do it. You got more in you than this. You can give more. You can pray more. You can worship more.
Yes.
Like you're capable of being
You
a
can
life.
win.
You can raise your
Yes.
family.
Yes.
You can sacrifice as a husband or a wife. Like, come on,
Be more
there's
like
more in
Jesus.
you. Yes,
Yeah,
right.
less like you.
And if
Yes.
if you don't ever get that trainer pastor from anybody in your life, now Nathan came across a little mean in a way. But I guess you can maybe in the pendulum swing, it's better to be mean and direct in our consumeristic culture than to be soft.
I
and
would rather
pliable.
that. Yeah.
The customer service part of this is that, like, even subconsciously it feels better because you keep your church, it's growing. Healthy things grow. So my church is growing, which means I'm healthy. I know that I'm not against that statement. We're gonna open up a whole can of worms. I just want to say, if you draw the line
Anything
this
that's
way,
not growing is dead.
but if you stop thinking as customer service and you start doing this, it means that some people who are looking for the customer service thing it's gonna be painful for pastors.
Sure.
And it means some people are gonna leave, and you may have a smaller group. And I think that's what he's getting at, which I do agree with. It's a smaller group, but a group that is fully living out.
Okay, but
what
here's
it
the
looks
balance.
like.
So let's go back to the conversation that you had with the guy who came in and said, I attend online 3 times a month and I come once. Okay. I do think there's a conversation here. So let me go back to my trainer. My trainer asked me, do I have the permission to train you? And I said, absolutely. And he said then, all right, we're going to do it my way. And I'm going to push you. And I said, I need to be pushed. And that agreement allowed me to be aggressive, allowed him to be aggressive with me. I do think there's a conversation that allows for us to pastor people by asking their permission before we get in their face. Like to say, if you consider me your pastor, like I know you've been coming to Allison Park, and so is this your church home?
Sure.
Like, and would you consider me your pastor? Would you allow me the opportunity to speak to you about this particular thing you just mentioned? Because listen, man, if I'm really your pastor, like pastoring means I can talk to you about stuff.
Yeah.
So they give you permission. Okay, I don't think this is healthy for you. Maybe you need to flip this 3 times in person and once online. But like, I don't think you're not going to become what you need to be or give God what you need to give him if it's convenience based.
Sure.
And what I'm hearing from you is this is something maybe you're fudging on a little bit. And I want to challenge you. I do think getting permission from people is important.
Well,
Because-
let me challenge that.
Okay.
I think that's a great level.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between Disney World and the gym And then the next level is a personal trainer.
Yeah.
Like, okay, now it's time to
Wait, I
personal
don't follow
trainer.
that analogy.
All right, Disney World, you go in, it's like, how
It's
can
all
we
for
make this
you.
magical?
Okay, got it.
Don't break character.
Right.
Everything is clean. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's like your experiences are our priority kind of a thing. Then there's a level of like, oh, you're coming here to get fit. This is a gym. Like, we want things to be clean and stuff, but like everybody here is working out because this is a gym. Like,
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And then there's now I'm at the gym and I really want to go further, so I'm going to hire a personal trainer.
Yeah.
I think
Okay. That's
our
a really
church-
good analogy.
Yeah.
I think our church service.
So what are
could-
we? We're not.
We were at some point a little bit Disney, a little bit Chip.
Where are we now?
I think we're trying to become. This is just maybe it's just dumb sounding. I think we're trying to become clear that following Jesus means it's a lifestyle where you're working out to
So
follow him.
We're
So
moving from the Disney World experience to the gym.
I think we're trying to get there.
With
I think
occasional
we-
Disney World moments like the
Yeah,
Easter
of
egg
course,
hunt
of
or
course,
whatever.
and that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
But we're talking about two things that are needed, which is like the deep dive into your nutrition and your exact things, which is separate from the general communication of like what this is. Both
Yeah.
are needed. Like, we can't just be like every all of this needs to happen in interpersonal conversations. We'll never handle general health standards from a public standpoint. I think both are really needed.
Yeah.
Maybe the more aggressive pastoral standpoint needs to be the one-on-one.
Yes.
But what are the okay, this is the nutrition guidelines.
Yeah.
The health guidelines for your
So
Yeah.
you've now brought us to the point where we just need to discuss. So how do we talk about it? Because I think we generally know, we've talked about what is a substitute. You're like, it's not good. What's supplemental? So then in person or online, how do we talk about it? Who wants to take the first stab? I can take the first stab, or you. I don't mind. I have ideas.
go for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that one of the things that would help. So we're having conversations. This is probably a separate podcast, maybe at some point in the future. We're having conversations about how to be clearer when we're presenting a gospel message. You know what that actually means. The choice to give everything that you have and repent in exchange for everything He has, which means following. Anyway, all that to say, I think that sometimes one of the things we can do is be a little bit clearer when we have our talking moments in our church services. So that could be in our worship moment, that can be our MC moment, and maybe it could sometimes be our sermon intro, where we talk about what it means to be a part of the church community.
Yeah.
It's not just an anonymous thing where you come, but if we can say things like, we're so glad that you're here, and I think there's a way for us to address those who have decided to commit.
Can I give a specific example
Please
of
go,
that?
please go.
One of the things that I have felt convicted about personally is, as I would share as part of the prayer moment or as I would lead worship, out of a genuine desire to see people surrender things to God, I would say, no matter what you're going through, God sees you, which is true.
Yeah, that's a good
It
line.
wasn't balanced with what I felt as I was praying about it, as I led prayer this past weekend, was God wants you to know that He is holy. And if you're going to follow Him and worship Him, it demands a response from you.
Yeah. Wow.
So it's not about, yes, God sees you, but sometimes we need that balance of that side where it's like, if you're going to do this, this is what this requires of you.
yeah.
I think that's an example of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let me take my shot at it.
Good.
So,
I
hey,
didn't, my shot kind of sucked.
hey, my name is Jeff. This is the typical introduction that I do at the beginning. My name is Jeff Leake. I'm so glad you've joined us today. First, I want to say, if you're here in person, this is the best way to do church, right here, to be able to be with your brothers and sisters in Christ and be in a room and worshiping and ministering to each other. We realize that not everybody can be here. For instance, our God Behind Bars campus, you're a video-based campus, and while you cannot be with us, we want you to know we love you, and we are seeing you in the spirit as if you're here. And if you're joining us online for some reason you cannot be here in person today, we hope that you'll get here soon, but we're really glad you're part of the online audience today.
That's great. That's perfect. Because inherently baked into there is we really would like everybody to be here because there's something you're missing out on otherwise.
Yeah.
I think there's been a hesitancy to say you're missing out on anything.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, honestly, the whole world got turned upside down and shaken, and for a little while it was all online.
Yeah.
So
it's
everything was online. Like, you're like, okay, we're glad. And we were saying, while we can't be together in person, we're able to be linked together in this way, and we're still the body of Christ. And by the way, the church isn't a building and it's not an event, it's us, right? Okay, so we had to lean into that messaging. Honestly, I have preached and talked more about ecclesiology, which is the theology of the church, in the last 4 years than I ever have in my entire life, because I realize now we've never really put the proper frame around what church actually is theologically. And so what we're wrestling through is this new technological opportunity and where it fits into our ecclesiology.
It's true.
In the way that we do practical ministry here.
Yep.
And we have had the pendulum swing a little bit, and I think now we're landing on a space that's a little more balanced.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those, like, we've talked about this in the last, let's say, 4 years. I don't know when, but I know this has been a conversation. Like why do we have membership? What's the deal with membership? Isn't that kind of like a club? And at one point we're like, yeah, I guess, we have it so you can vote on certain things and a certain level of accountability. But like the further we get into these conversations, I'm like, oh, it's actually a big deal.
Yeah.
Because like, it isn't membership, like in a sense, when you're deciding to follow Jesus, it is such a commitment that you're deciding to become a member
part of
of
something
the
big.
body of
Right.
Christ.
Yeah.
It's not a
local
casual
expression
thing. Yeah.
of a local church.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I think that my thing that I'm thinking about would be taking all of our talking moments through the filter. If I'm going to follow Jesus, what does this require of me? So I think if it's like, that's probably a way that we could talk about that in our MC moments that doesn't feel too insane.
Which we put it through the filter of customer service prior.
Right.
yeah, we had before.
We had been. Everything was from the talking point of customer service, because
Why would this benefit you?
the church had not done very good at customer service in my generation when I was growing up.
They were exclusive to people.
They just were clumsy.
Okay.
So the church became good at customer service, but then we realized now that talking about everything from a customer service point of view is counter to the gospel.
Yes, it is.
So-
Jeez, that was intense, but you're right.
It's true.
Yeah.
But so like we wouldn't say if you're going to follow Jesus, you have to show up to the marriage conference. Like
Yeah,
that's like
no,
so
right.
specific.
Right.
Well,
And we do want to explain why the marriage conference is beneficial for you.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't mean we remove that.
Yeah.
But we start to think in terms of when we're leading prayer or promoting something.
Yeah.
How can I talk in a way where I make it clear, like if you're going to be a Christian, this is what it requires of you.
Yeah, you could say about the marriage
self-sacrifice.
conference to say, look, being a Christ follower as a husband means that you do everything within your power to learn to love your wife properly. And the marriage conference is here to help you, equip you to do that.
Right.
Like, because we all need help to figure that out. So it's going to help your marriage, but it's really going to help you do what you have committed to do as a husband,
Right.
which is to love your wife. Okay, that is the filter of
For sure.
followership rather than customer service.
Yeah.
So, well,
Yeah.
we're going a little long in this one.
Yeah, it's
so
okay. People always like the long episodes. Yeah, so I guess just like I'll say one last thing as we're kind of closing, just to wrap it all up. I think this is probably evident, but just in case, I think we're all talking about this not from an Allison Park Church commitment level. This is more, we have realized that we're not always clear about what Jesus himself requires of Christians.
Right.
Jesus has very clear things that he asks from us. And so if I am going to follow Jesus, regardless as to what part of the world or what church I belong to, or even what time period we were born into, there are the same general things it means if we're going to follow Jesus. And as a church movement in the West and in America in particular, we've not always been as clear as we need to be. So because people are making commitments, we want to help you understand what it is you're actually committing to in the most sensitive, grace-filled way, but full of truth so that people can grow spiritually the way that God wants them. Is that a good way to summarize that? So, Great. All right. Well, that was a good conversation. Thanks for joining us, Josh.
It's good to be back.
Yeah, glad having you. And thank you, whoever you are right now for listening and being a part of this. You can actually help us as well. One thing that we would always love to ask would be to help share the word in a number of ways. It would really mean a lot if you could leave us a 5-star review wherever you're listening to this. If it's, Spotify or Apple Podcasts or different podcast platforms, you could leave us a 5-star review. That'd be very kind and very helpful. You can also share on social media with friends. or you can like and subscribe on YouTube. All those things make a big difference to us. So thank you again for joining us. We'll see you guys again next time.